Today we'll be talking a little bit about how to monetize an arts degree. You hear a lot about arts degrees get you a job at Starbucks. But yeah, a lot of people do have questions with regards to both the practicality of an arts degree and the monetizability. Side note, Emily and I are both from arts degrees. What did you graduate from?
I had a major in legal studies. I had two minors. One is sociology and the other one is economics.
And I graduated from political science and business with a minor in HR. Let's jump right into it. We're gonna follow the traditional mode. Like if you have no work experience and you're kind of the stereotype of an arts degree holder, this video is for you. So one of the key ways to use your arts degree as a launching pad to start your career, if you don't plan on going into more academia or if you don't plan on doing more schooling but you want to jump into the workforce, is this idea of you have to start building connections in university.
If you haven't watched our first episode, we actually mentioned making older friends in university, making friends from upper years, and I think this drives home well the idea of building connections, and how those are interrelated is the fact that if you have friends who are older than you, who have graduated earlier than you, then you can probably leverage those friendships and relationships to help you at least get into an interview for a company. And that was my personal experience. I get to skip all the HR pre-screening process and get that process started. So again, that is very helpful. Whether you're in or not in a co-op program, I think it's important that you maintain those connections, get to know people. I think that's the main idea.
Because of the way companies use referral bonuses, which is basically this idea that companies pay their employees to basically become recruiters. Sure. Right?
Yes.
And so like, for example, in my corporation and in Emily's corporation, we both get referral bonuses, which means that any of our friends that we think would be a fit, there's actually an incentive for Emily and I to go and, recruit them basically. Right. And get them past the interviews or not the interviews, but get them past the resume sending process.
Yeah.
Right? And over to the interview. That's big. You don't have to compete with the thousands of resumes that come in.
Yeah.
Because Emily and I are your friend and our corporations do trust us and they pay us.
Yeah.
Imagine what it would be like if you were our connection.
Right.
Right? So, and we're not the only ones. So do make friends out there. And here's another key thing when we talk about connections. Don't just know them like, oh, I know you and I have your phone number. Work with them on a project. Work with them on a hobby, right? Create a deliverable, which bleeds into our next point. Build a portfolio. I think when art students get to me, because I interview students for jobs, so when they talk to me, it's like, there's all these intangible, well, I'm a good writer. Well, prove it. Show me a writing sample.
Yeah.
Right? Or I have very good communication skills. Show me a YouTube channel.
Yeah.
Right? Like, there's all these things that you probably do on the side that are actually monetizable and that you should put as part of a corporation's portfolio. And the easiest way to do that is anytime you take on a project or if you have a side hobby, treat it like a scrapbook. I manage this community social media feed for this club that I'm in. Right?
Yes.
Put that over there and then screenshot the feed so that people can assess the kind of content you produce that has monetary value.
Yeah. And just to tag on to that, like, interests and hobbies matter. Sometimes you don't think to put that on a resume or in your portfolio, but certainly you've learned skills through your hobby or the interests that you participate in. So those are really important things that you should demonstrate and let people know that this is something that you're up to, that you're interested in, and that's something that you've mastered throughout the years.
A lot of people, when they think about their hobbies, they think, oh, it's not monetizability. I wouldn't ever be paid like a professional grade salary for my hobby. That is not true. Mm-hmm. That's absolutely not true. When I was applying for jobs, Hudson's Bay was literally hiring people with over thousands of followers because they couldn't do it.
Huh.
Like a lot of corporate people don't know what you're doing, especially when it comes to social media or when it comes to graphic design. You'd be surprised how many medium to small businesses don't know this stuff. Right? There's a demographic difference. Like there's 40, 50-year-old managers that know how to work Adobe, Photoshop, but let's be real, like, there's more powerful tools in Photoshop. So what you're doing when it comes to TikTok, what you're doing when it comes to Instagram, what you're doing when you're designing, like, don't underestimate or don't try to assume that it's not professional grade. Right? Put it in that portfolio and show them. And I guarantee you, you will stand out above everyone who did not have the same kind of thing to show during an interview. All right, let's talk about resume building. A lot of people think that when you graduate or when you're in an arts degree, that resume building does not happen until you're done your degree, and then you can finally put that degree in as the bullet point.
Yes.
Okay, that's a big mistake.
Yeah.
That's a big mistake. You should not lean on your arts degree as your primary focus, which is to say, start building your resume before you're even done your arts degree. You always want to be cognizant and reflective about what you are doing within your program, right? That matters. Like, if you are writing an article for your school newspaper, that matters. Write that down, because you probably won't remember that you did that by the time you're done your program, because you'll do other cool things.
Yeah.
Right? You should always be building and churning your resume as you go through your arts program. You want to be cognizant because you are building these skills, and it would be a shame if you don't capture that. So another thing when it comes to resumes is start with your biggest, baddest point that makes you stand out, right? Because if you don't start with your hook, then I'm not going to read the rest of your resume as a recruiter. Right? They want to know the best thing about you immediately. It's kind of like an essay. If you start with your best argument, it's very hard for people to overcome that primacy bias, right? If you start with the best thing about you, then I'm going to be compelled to read more about your resume, right? Versus someone who says, I graduated with an arts degree, next, right? Because those are a dime a dozen. But if you start with just like, I wrote this article, well, in professional language, but like wrote 50 articles for the school. I'm like, whoa, okay, you've produced content.
Alongside with what Jade mentioned, I think it's also important to quantify your achievements. And what I mean by that is, for example, if you write a piece on social media, for example, on Instagram, I think one key important thing to track is the reach. How many people have read your content? How popular was it? Quantify,
right? It's one thing to say that you write. How many articles? How much is the reach, as Emily was saying? What was your audience, right? What was your followership that you were writing to? Was it 30,000 like it is in the University of Waterloo? Or was it 500 or 50 in your club, right? That stuff matters. Managers are very, very quick decision makers, and we use a lot of heuristics, and a lot of that is numbers. But a lot of art students say, I have good analytical skills. Well, when was the last time you solved something, and how much did that add to a business? Did you solve the problem by 30%, 40%? Did you create an efficiency of over 50%? Like, quantify those things to the best of your ability. You're not going to be able to quantify everything, but the more that you can, the more tangibility you have on your resume. So look out for those things.
There are a lot of things that you might not know about HR that you probably should know. A lot of the times they don't really know what they're looking for.
Right.
So what we would suggest is cast your net as wide as possible, apply to many jobs, as many as you can. Don't disqualify yourself, because if you're the first one to disqualify yourself, no one knows that you're actually looking for something, right?
Correct.
A lot of like the job postings you see, they actually turn you away because they make you think that you are not qualified. And you will see a lot of entry-level jobs they require 3 to 5 years, and they want you to have a master's degree. Have you heard some of those absurd job postings? Because I think we've been frequently exposed to those when we were looking for jobs.
Shoot your shot. Right?
Yeah, for sure.
If you don't have 3 to 4 years, but you have 2 to 3 years of experience, shoot it.
Yes.
Right? I've gotten, job interviews with they were asking for 7 years when I've had only 4 years of experience, and I got the interview, right? A lot of the time they just put it there because that's their gauge, and not all of their models will be applicable, and they know that. right? So for example, when I create job descriptions for my company, I like to put 2 to 3 years of experience. But if someone comes to me with a kick-ass portfolio and like just like 1 year, I'm taking that person. You know, forget the 2 to 3 years. Let's take this person. So there's still an aspect of meritocracy out there. So shoot your shot. Rejection is basically a very subjective thing. Here's a story. Story time with me.
Sure.
I remember in a co-op program where everyone is like applying to jobs, right, with university partners, I was talking to my friend and he was so downcast and he was talking about like, man, I got rejected so many times. I'm just like, well, which companies have you applied to? He's just like, well, I applied to BlackBerry. I applied to this like airport one. I applied to this like music engineering one. And I was just like, oh, that's it? You know, I was just like, I applied to like 50 in the first round and I did not get a single interview, not one. Like he's worried about 3. I wasn't even breaking a sweat because I had applied to 50 and not one of them had gotten back to me, right? It's a numbers game. Right. It really is a numbers game. So don't take it personally and, you know, shoot your shot.
Yeah. And I think a lot of parents have this misconception or encouraging their kids to not work entry-level jobs, to not apply to entry-level jobs because they think that, well, you graduated from an undergrad, you've graduated from a master's degree, like you're above this job. And I think that's a huge misconception, and I think there needs to be humility to work from the ground up. So I'm not contradicting from what we said, cast your net wide, but I think doing that as well as have a sober mindset of what you're aiming for. When you first graduated, don't look for an executive position or a managerial position, right?
If you find out that for whatever reason you are not getting like salaried jobs,
right,
change it up and apply to wage jobs. Like Emily said, you're not above or beyond any job, even when you earn and get your degree. So, you know, to show that we're not hypocritical, my first job out of an arts degree, my average, by the way, was about an 85. It was an unhonored program, and I thought I could do entry-level communications jobs. My first job that I landed was at a call center.
Right.
It's actually one of the best jobs I've ever had.
Yeah.
You know, and like they basically decided my hours for me. It was not a 9 to 5. Sometimes it was like, you know, you started at like 8 p.m. and went until 2 a.m.
Right. Yeah.
But you're not above any job. And like sometimes if you need stepping stones to get to that job that you really want, do what it takes.
Yes, exactly. And for full disclosure, I work for a bookstore, being their CSR, customer service rep. I also worked as a customer service rep at a rec center, just being at the front desk, taking admissions. I've worked as a property manager, which is more or less like a superintendent. We've walked this path before, and this is coming from an honest place. Like, we're not just saying it because this sound good.
Right. And it's not saying that you have to stay there and accept the crap that's given to you. But there is something to be said about stepping stones, right? Like if you recognize that like you want to be an editor or a publisher, maybe first you do have to be a coordinator.
Yeah.
Right? And that's okay. It's not a race.
Yes, exactly. And everyone has their own timeline.
So with all that said, if there's a specific topic that you want Emily and I to talk about in our next video when it comes to university life or just basic adulting, feel free to comment or DM Emily and I. We're here listening and we very much want your input. So if you haven't already, do subscribe to our YouTube channel, which is The Adulting Adults. You can hit the bell right there to get notifications whenever we release videos. We're going to be trying to do this week by week. You could also follow us on social media on TikTok and Instagram. So,
Bye.
bye.